treat to have next our speaker, Matt Gresick. Let me read a little bit of the bio here. Matt Gresick, another Western Pennsylvanian like myself, from Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, graduated from the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Was a degree of secondary education and emphasis in history. Went on to teach 6th grade in ancient history in Wacomico County, Maryland, where he did some coaching and taught American government and did mock trial, supervised the chess club. Boy, I wish you'd go to church here. You sound like an interesting guy. During his time, he received his Mentor Teacher of the Year award from Salisbury. Currently lives in Central Maryland. His wife, Grace, works at Reservoir High School in Howard County, where he teaches U.S. history, American government, world history, AP Human Geography. You'll have to tell me what that means, because I don't understand that one. Ancient history, sociology, psychology, world religions. Again, having coached a variety of sports. Master's degree in curriculum instruction from McDaniel College. Served as a professional development school liaison for Towson University, supporting the next generation of teachers. With his fellow educator, Eric Ebersol, helped him become a Maryland State delegate, and then has chaired the Government Relations Committee for Howard County Education Association. Ran himself with the Baltimore County Board of Education in 2018. Was honored to receive the Gilder Lerman Maryland History Teacher of the Year Award 2020. Chaired the Catonsville Middle School PTSA Equity Committee in 2021, and the following year became the NEA Director as well as Board Member of the Maryland State Education Association. We are all looking forward to Matt Gresick.
Thank you so much for this honor to be here today. My name is Matt Gresick. I'm a teacher by trade. I'm going to introduce you to some members of my family before we get started. Reverend Ed Gresick is there, my dad. My son Frankie is there beside him. And then my mom, Joy Gresick. My daughter Gabrielle, or Ellie Gresick, and then my beautiful wife, Grace Gresick. I'd also like to recognize Senator Charles Sidnor in attendance today, transformative leader that calls people in instead of calls people out, and I appreciate his presence here today. And if you don't mind, I'm a teacher, not a preacher, so do you mind if anybody have hearing impaired? Actually, my right ear is slightly, I have hearing impairment in my right ear. Does anybody have hearing impairment? I'll stay up here if that's the case. If not, I'll get down to the floor. All right, so can everybody hear me? Yeah. All right, there we go. Good morning, members of the Lansdowne Christian Church community. It's my pleasure to be here today and honored to receive this prize. Today we gather to honor the brave men and women who have given their lives in service to our country. In particular, those men and women of the Lansdowne community that have gone beyond the price to serve our country and speak to our democratic values. On this Memorial Day, remember their sacrifices of those who have fought and died to defend our freedom, and we honor their memory with gratitude and respect. But as we remember the fallen, we also renew our commitment to the values that they fought and died for. We must commit ourselves to the pursuit of justice, equality, and freedom for all people, both home and abroad. In writing this speech, I read a book recently called A Woman of No Importance by Sonia Purnell, and it's about Virginia Hall. Virginia Hall is a woman from Baltimore, from this very area, who was part of the Foreign Service Corps, and overseas in Turkey, she was on a hunting trip, and she actually lost her leg in a hunting accident. She was then recruited later to be a spy for the British government and allies during the war. And she became the top spy right before the war and led all the efforts against the Nazis in France and against the Vichy French and throughout the war. She was dynamic. She recruited people from all over. At one point, she had nuns from the local convent helping out the Allies, as well as sex workers from the local brothel that Nazis liked to frequent. She was phenomenal. I just can't, I'm not going to ruin the entire book for you, but at one point she actually performs a jailbreak to break out Allied spies out of the Vichy French prison, and then escapes the Nazis on foot, I'll remind you, on only 1 foot, across the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain, and then later comes back and helps out the Allies in sabotaging Nazi deployments and Nazi resources. Phenomenal woman who also is the mother of the CIA. And I'm happy to say she's getting 2 movies coming out about her. Virginia Hall, you'll hear about her coming up soon. And it's great that she's getting honored in how in her service to our country. One of the things that led me to that was thinking about other members who haven't got that credit that they so deserve. Margaret Bailey, who was not recognized for her service, she was an African-American woman who served in World War II as in the Women's Army Corps. The first ever woman to serve in the Women's Army Corps and serve in Europe in World War II. Another Marylander that we seldom hear about is William L. Washington, who served with Charles Wesley Hall in the Civil War. He was an African-American veteran, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his bravery in the Battle of Chatham Farm in Virginia. Grace Banker was a World War I veteran who served as the telephone operator in France and was the first ever woman incorporated into battle into France. Now, Grace Banker was born in Jersey, but I can still consider her a Marylander as she lived most of her life in this great state. In fact, Charles Wesley Hall himself was from Illinois and a transplant to the state. I can relate, being from Western PA. I understand that transplant status. When I first came to the area over 20 years ago, I went to downtown Baltimore and I went to Cross Street Market. Since it's become very upscale and stuff like that, back then it was very cool. And you would go, and I went to this deli that was located there. And I asked for the sandwich, and the sandwich had coleslaw, and had Thousand Island dressing on it, and had chopped meat, and I got it. And then I commented to the old woman behind the counter, like, this would be great with some French fries on it. And she looked at me, only the way a Baltimore person can look at you, and with the thickest Baltimore accent possible, say, "You need to go back to Pittsburgh, huh?" But it's one of those things that over the years I've been proud to call this state my home. I've developed a love of our beautiful flag. I've also, for some reason, we keep at home 3 containers of Old Bay that we just like to put on everything. I don't know, there's something in the water. Unlike those mentioned before, though, I have never served in the military due to me being asthmatic. Like my grandfather and my mom's dad, who was also asthmatic, who decided to serve in the Merchant Marines, I decided to serve in a different way as a history teacher. Remember those past sacrifices and urging my students to model themselves after the noble legacies of those that have gone before has been a hallmark of my practice. My father and his father, my grandfather, served in World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam. In World War II, my grandfather's ship was sunk, was torpedoed, and then he was knocked unconscious, and his best friend pulled him out of the brink, pulled him out of the ocean into a life raft. And then my grandfather only came to only to watch strafing Japanese fighters kill his best friend. The boat that then picked him up was also torpedoed, and he survived that. My dad was in Vietnam, and he was on river patrol boats that would take special forces to different service areas. His ship was also ambushed and sunk. So maybe in the long run, I should thank having asthma for not being the 3rd Gresick in a row to be on a sunk naval vessel. Seriously though, their stories live on through me, to commitment and fortitude in times of hardship and peril. One of the things that I knowingly do with my own family, and my wife can attest to this, is we have a mantra in our house. And the mantra is, Gressicks have grit. And whenever my kids are, feeling that they can't do something, they're struggling, I'll say, Gressicks have what? And then they'll roll their eyes, and they'll say, grit. And it's one of those things that I harken back to the memory of my house. I pray that my teaching, like being a father, is done with the same courage and honor and dedication that my grandfather and dad displayed when they went into war, my grandparents. My social studies classes are filled with discussions and debates over controversial topics and historical issues. My logic is, if they can do the hard things, we should be able to teach and learn about the hard things. My classes are constantly challenged to come up with solutions for a world that doesn't constantly pit one side against the other, quagmire shouting each other out. I want my students leaving my class committed toward empathy, compassion, and building understanding so we can work toward a better tomorrow. But I also want them to do the right thing, even when it's difficult, to serve their country, their communities, and their fellow citizens with selflessness and dedication. It's why I continue to take my classes on world religions field trip. I take them to 6 different places of worship. I take them the first day, there's 2 days. First day I take them to a mosque, a church, a Jewish synagogue. The second day we go to a Buddhist temple, a Sikh Gurdwara, and then a Hindu temple. And it's to build that peace and understanding in the world that's sorely missed. One aspect of the field trip that always sticks with me that I'm going to share with you right now is the first day we end off with a visit to Temple Isaiah, where Rabbi Axelrod brings out the Torah scrolls, the Old Testament. And he shows us these Torah scrolls are like 500 years old, some of them gazelle skin, made of like lambs, and just all of these different artifacts. And he actually reads in Hebrew to the kids. But then he saves the last scroll, he brings it out. And he brings up the last scroll, and he doesn't open it up for the kids because it's only for special occasions. It's only for bar mitzvahs, and just, and really high holidays. And he says, this Torah scroll is very special. This Torah scroll, we don't own. It's on loan from Eastern Europe. It was found in the salt mines of Eastern Europe, and the Nazis were planning on putting it on display as a relic of the exterminated Jewish race in a museum. And he tells us this. And then he says, and I have a hard time getting through this, he says, though they were exterminated in hate, we rekindled them through love and remembrance. That's something that Charles Hall knew about. In this place, rekindling through love and remembrance, whose legacy we honor here today. He was a man who dedicated his life to serving others, and his work was inspired by his faith and his belief in the inherent dignity and worth of all people. I unfortunately know that the blood that runs through my veins also contains the legacy of those traitors that opposed Charles Hall and the Grand Army of the Republic. Those traitors of the Confederacy that desired to live off the enslavement of others to provide wealth for the few. Those traitors that wanted to preserve a way of life that promoted fear, hate, and racism for their own benefit. Those traitors that judged humanity by the color of their skin versus the content of their character. I remember their legacy and I'm ashamed. I remember their legacy and I do not deny their sin. I remember their legacy and it fuels me to be a better man, a better citizen, and a better Christian. I love quoting James Baldwin. He has so many great quotes. The one that I use a lot is, to accept one's past, one's history, is not the same as drowning in it. It is learning how to use it. An invented past can never be used. It cracks and crumbles under the pressures of life like clay in a season of drought. Recognizing that our past ancestors were far from perfect and did not always do what was right is necessary in reconciling with our own shortcomings. I sincerely wish that I could go back in time and encourage my Confederate relations to fight against slavery and for the promise of freedom forever. But all I can do is fight modern-day systems of oppression in my own life, as all of you do, and be an example of what to do and not ignore. I now encourage all of you to take a moment to not only remember the noble memories that we honor here today, but the memories of those that we must learn and grow from. Those whose actions were not in virtue, and let them still be an honest reflection of historical thought and truth. After a bloody civil war, the most deadly war we've ever fought, Arlington National Cemetery contains both Union and rebel soldiers who fought and died in that war. In 1868, the cemetery was first commemorated on Robert E. Lee's former estate, where his home was draped in mourning black. The services were led by President Grant, and after all the speeches were done, some 30,000 children, many orphaned from the war, and widows of the 20,000 Union soldiers and 100 or so rebel soldiers spread flowers, gave prayers, and sang hymns all throughout those green pastures covered with white marble tombstones. I don't know about all of you, but for me that's hard to imagine, having visited Arlington myself. It's difficult to picture people making noise in that cemetery, people carrying on with hymns and songs out loud. But if you were there at that moment, you would see and hear strained voices through tears saying, "I love you, Daddy. I'll never forget you, brother." You're crying out to heaven, "Why did you take my son?" I want you to just take a moment and imagine that. Given that Arlington is only a day's horse ride away from here, Charles Hall might have been there on that very day. Imagine what Charles saw, heard, and felt at that exact moment, rekindling that memory of his brothers in arms and reflecting on how their legacy can never fade and their sacrifice should never be in vain. In keeping with Charles Hall's memory, let us commit ourselves to the same values of service, justice, and equality that he stood up for and viewed in legacy of this congregation. Let us work to build a more just and peaceful world, one where all people can live in freedom and security. Let us remember that the sacrifices of the fallen were not in vain, were made defending the values that we all hold dear. Charles Hall loved his grand brothers, his grand army of the Republic, and it thus consecrated this land in their memory. We are standing in a uniquely American house, the only house like this in the entire world that has been preserved for the memory of those that kept this country together and those that believe that freedom is worth the ultimate sacrifice. As we honor the memory of the fallen on this Memorial Day, let us also honor the legacy of Charles Hall and the values that he wanted future generations to embrace. Let us commit ourselves to the work of building a more just and peaceful world, one where the sacrifices of the fallen will never be forgotten. And let's rekindle them in love today. Thank you so much for this prestigious award, and may God bless you all.